Donc, nous allons passer à la communication suivante, présentée par Andreas Vlachopoulos. Une communication qui porte sur le conflit sans la guerre, le cas des Cyclades à l'époque mycénienne.
Alors bonjour les amis, vous m'écoutez?
Oui.
Bien qu'on n'a pas pu voyager à Corse, on est resté à Naxos et Ioannis Zogkos va lire la communication. On est prêt? Ok. Merci.
Next slide, please. At the center of the Aegean Sea, to the east of the coast of the Greek mainland, lies the island group of the Cyclades. Next slide, please. Thanks to their strategic position on the sea lanes linking mainland Greece, the Asia Minor, and Crete, along with their natural advantages, such as exploitable metal ores and minerals, the islands were from Neolithic times a crossroads of economic transactions and cultural interactions. For the same reasons, the Cyclades became an arena for disputing powers and conflicting interests, the defense of which was combined with fortification works during the 3rd and the 2nd millennium BC, although with puzzling discontinuities on the islands and in some periods. The presentation examines indications of warfare and related operations in the Mycenaean period and tries to ascertain to what degree these are imprinted in the archaeological record. In this endeavor, information about warfare is sought from evidence of destruction in the settlements and citadels, fortification works and weapons, as well as depictions of martial subjects in art. Next slide, please. The Mycenaeans, a Greek-speaking people distributed in principalities and kingdoms, promoted warfare and the aristocratic hand as virtues of social and political cohesion from as early as the 16th century BC. The 14th and 13th centuries BC are known to scholarship as the Mycenaean Univ, a term due to the wide geographical area over which Mycenaean influence was diffused, spanning the breadth of the Aegean and Crete. Next slide, please. In the Cyclades, in the first half of the 14th century, part of the coastal settlement at Vlachopoulos on Milos was destroyed by fire. Next slide, please. Following this, a building strikingly similar in plan to the palatial megara of mainland Greece and considered to have been an administrative center was constructed upon the roof of the Rome. Presence has been considered indicative of an actual assault and assumption of total control of the settlement at Vlachopoulos, perhaps by mainland forces from the Peloponnese, with light opposite. Next slide, please. The strengthening and reconstruction in the first half of the 13th century BC of the fortification wall of the settlement, which was fortified already in the 16th century BC, is perceived as an indication of insecurity for the port of Milos. Next slide, please. To the contrary, the abandonment in the late 13th century BC of the Mycenaean city at Grota, City-1, on the north shore of the town of Naxos, could most probably be attributed to flooding rather than to an attack. Next slide, please. The collapse of the strictly controlled Mycenaean economy run by the palaces in the Argolids, Boeotia, and Messenia around 1200 BC was followed by some 150 years in which the institutions of political and social organization are unclear. This period, which came to an end in the middle years of the 11th century BC, represents the final flaring of the Mycenaean civilization and is known as late Helladic 3C or post-Palatial. It was undoubtedly a period of intense socio-political and economic changes, which brought radical realignment both in mainland Greece and the wider East Mediterranean, which too was troubled by similar phenomena. These developments are believed to have shaped a general climate of hostilities, insecurity, and population migrations, in the framework of which several settlements were deserted, while others thrived. Next slide, please. The founding of the citadel at Kounarias, on a rocky bluff overlooking the closed bay of North Paros, has been interpreted as an episode in the migratory movements of this period. During the first half of the 12th century BC, a sizable complex which comprised the central building, corridors, and ancillary space of rooms was founded on the upper terrace. The building is protected by a strong fortification wall, which also has a retaining function, as it is at the same time the south wall of the three magazines. The complex has been interpreted as a ruler's center on the basis of the architectural type of the building and the luxurious nature of the finds from its showrooms. Next slide, please. At Grota, a new settlement, CTP, was founded in the early 20th century BC after the abandonment of its precursor. Next slide, please. Apart from the different orientation of the house's needs, the new city was limited in area and surrounded by a fortification wall that's unusual for the Cyclades, which combines a robust stone-built shop with a mud-built superstructure. What the wall protected and from whom is not known, as the excavations uncovered no destruction layers that could have been caused by violent events in a flourishing island city. Next slide, please. On Sifnos, at the turn of the 13th to 12th century BC, the citadel was found at Agios Andreas, which offers an unimpeded view over the east part of the island and the East Aegean. The impressive citadel, obviously the island's major center at that period, is protected by a strong and composite defensive system. Next slide, please. This consists of a double wall, the inner part of which has cyclopean masonry, bastions, and blind casemates. The scale of the wall, the conception and implementation of which presupposes the existence and centralized organization and supervision, refers to fortification of mainland palatial centers, with which it has constructional features in common. Next slide, please. The relation between Agios Andreas and the naturally fortified citadel at Baronas Afrodi, a short distance away in the southwest of Sifnos, is still unknown. The surface finds from the latter site suggest that it was founded in the early 20th century BC and existed throughout the post-palatial periods. Next slide, please. The upper terrace, which is occupied by a central building of oblong plan, is protected by an outwork of lesser extent and different construction from contemporary fortification walls in its Cyclades. The fact that only the upper terrace was walled versus the basic priority was to protect the central building, but also that there was no fear of an island attack. The central building, oblong-dromical with parallel wall spaces, rooms, and perhaps corridors, is comparable to the building at Kounarias and was possibly associated with mercantile activities or workshops. Next slide, please. In this case, the small citadel, the natural harbor of Pathi and the coast of Thaki, together have formed the intermediate trading nodes between inland Agios Andreas and the southwest Cyclades, Milos, Molos, Serifos, as attested also by the large quantity of imported pottery. The interdisciplinary project now in progress is expected to shed light on this issue. Next slide, please. Despite the indications of a climate of war and unrest in the Cyclades, which the defensive work reflect, the only case of destruction that could be attributed to enemy attack is at Kounarias. The citadel was destroyed by fire around the mid-12th century BC, mid-late Helladic civilization. Animal skeletons brought to light in the ash layer of the ground floor were interpreted by the excavator as due to a sweeping enemy invasion. Furthermore, the large pebbles found along the length of the fortification wall, which had perhaps been used as missiles, as well as the rather large number of stone arrowheads, were considered as a test preparation for facing the imminent siege, perhaps an early episode in the traditional enmity between Parians and Naxians. However, the fire and the destruction of the settlement which followed could have been caused by an earthquake, a common phenomenon in the Aegean. The publication of the Kounarias excavation is expected to give clearer answers. Next slide, please. The warrior graves and the presence of the technologically superior bronze sword of now two type, perhaps the North Italian origin, are a possible indication of the climate of warfare in post-palatial times. The cemeteries of Grotto, Ataplomata and Camini, yielded two intact swords of this type and part of a third, as well as a few bronze spear points with accompanying burials of preeminent members of the local elite. Next slide, please. Also from Naxos comes a cup decorated with a battle scene between two warriors with spears. Next slide, please. In the pottery of this period, scenes of naval battles and maritime operations appear for the first time in the Aegean. No analogous representations are known so far from Cyclades, with the exception perhaps of a set with depictions of a manned ship from Metropolis Square in Naxos, where the fortification wall and the well-preserved workshop sector of City 2 were revealed. Next slide, please. Last, from the Cyclades, come two examples of warrior representations, the one a relief figure of Mycenaean in panoply on an ivory plaque from Delos, and the other a helmeted figure incised on a mud plaque from Ioannina, a war without parallel. Of course, it is more likely that these two finds reproduce established motifs of the palatial iconography rather than echo actual martial events on the island. The frieze of boar's tusk helmets from Aphrodite, here, dated to 1600 BC, as well as other depictions in the wood paintings, in any case, show that this weaponry existed long before it became par excellence Mycenaean and was equally Minoan and Cycladic. Next slide, please. Thanks to their privileged location, the Cyclades were from early times the hub of historical developments in the Bronze Age Aegean. Defensive planning and indication of the climate of war are ascertained throughout the centuries of Mycenaenizations of the islands, but proof of warfare is scant, if not non-existent. Much clearer are the data available for the post-palatial period, when the emerging centers that took over the reins of the economy and enhanced the new political elites obviously forged alliances and provoked rivalries, and took part in organized campaigns on land and sea in the manner described in the later epochs of the Trojan War. The situation would have demanded the creation of new fortifications or the reinforcement of existing ones, a trend that's obvious from as early as the 13th century BC and reached its peak in the 12th. Almost all the Cycladic settlement of these years are fortified. However, in all probability, like the war motifs that are reproduced in art, the fortification walls too appear to retain the Aegean substrate of the walls they define, control, and protect in the island cities. Next slide, please. The Cyclades have a long tradition in fortification, going back to the Neolithic period, Strophilas on Andros, and the early Bronze Age, Castrion Cyrus, Panicus, and Naxos, features of which, such as bastions and double wall, can be identified later in the Mycenaean fortification walls. During the period of their expansion, the Mycenaean imposed their presence in the islands more as a way of life than as colonizers or conquerors. By continuing the habitation in settlements that have been fortified for centuries, they surely adapted to the minds of the locals. When circumstances demanded new fortification works, the Mycenaeans lived in the Cyclades, incorporated in them mainland features, such as cyclopean masonry and offsets on the facade as a fertile form of reborn. With the demise of the post-Palatial world, the walled settlements of the Cyclades were abandoned or changed use. And the final slide, please. The wind of warfare seems to have blown the Cyclades all through Mycenaean times, without us taking into account the sea, where, apart from organized naval battles, the islanders fought involvement with piracy and marauding raids on the coast were rekindled. During the post-Palatial period in particular, with the sea lanes now free of the intervention of royal fleets, the sea was perhaps a decisive factor for aggravating the climate of insecurity. However, the pinpointing of martial or piratical events in the archaeological record is rare. In fact, over a long period of some 350 years, the only possible cases of organized attacks are at Philakopin in 1450 BC and at Lycomeres in 1150 BC. The intensification of research is hoped to bring forth new data related to the Mycenaean period and evidence to document martial and other episodes. Until then, the Cyclades are considered an arena of warfare, but mainly in the bibliography, without the presence of war itself to inscribe the archaeological data as historical documents. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup pour cette communication.